Hello, everyone, and welcome to Highnote's panel discussion for Women's History Month 2023. I am your moderator, Jillian Smith, and I am coming to you from amazing Phoenix, Arizona. And let me just tell you that we have an incredible discussion for today. Our panelists are some of the top in their field, and they are going to be offering us incredible perspective. And I'm going to introduce them all in just a minute, but first I wanted to give a bit of context as to why we are hosting this event and how we came across this theme. So first I'll talk a little bit about the theme that we settled on, which is storytelling as a superpower. The National Women's History Alliance, which is largely credited as being the creator of National Women's History Month, they every year come out with a different theme. And when we came across the fact that this year's theme was celebrating women who share our stories, we thought, why fix what's not broken? That's an incredible theme, especially because storytelling manifests itself in so many different varieties, which I think you'll see in our panelists today. And we also wanted to highlight the fact that this is a superpower because these women are doing an incredible thing in their capacity and in their field. For example, we have someone who is very literally using storytelling to highlight the careers of other women in her space as a journalist. We have somebody who is using her storytelling capability to share ideas about products and get teams motivated to execute on product strategy. We have somebody else who has a superpower of unifying investors and teams around building a product and founding a company in a space where only 5.6% of women are CEOs. And then finally, we have somebody who's using superpowers quite literally through her role on the big screen at Marvel Entertainment and working with superheroes in a cinematic capacity every day. So that's how we landed on this theme, storytelling as a superpower. And the reason why we engage with this here at Highnote is because intentional inclusion is one of our core values. It's something that we do not because we want timely events to happen or because it's the topic du jour, but rather how can we incorporate activities that infuse including people who might otherwise be excluded into every aspect of what we do and the fabric of what we are here at Highnote. And so our leadership has been incredibly supportive in fostering discussions like these, communities like the ones that we're engaging in here today. And I just couldn't be more excited to bring our panelists up. And so without further ado, I'm going to let them all introduce themselves. And we agreed beforehand, just to make it easy, that we were going to go in alphabetical order by first name, which I struggled with because I couldn't remember the end of the alphabet. So I was going through it all in my head, but now we've gotten it sorted out. So without further ado, please, panelists, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Angélique Roche. As Julian mentioned, I'm a journalist and I'm a host over at Marvel and a producer who gets to talk about people's stories.
Amazing. I think that means I'm up. Hi, I'm Nicole Casperson. I am also a journalist and the founder of FinTech is Femme, a media company designed to uphold FinTech's promise of financial inclusivity by elevating the stories of women and diverse leaders. Happy to be here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria Koo. I am Highnote's head of product and design and have been in the tech industry for a while, amongst others. Really excited to be here as well.
Good afternoon, everyone from Dallas, Texas. I'm Yasaman Hadjibashi, co-founder and CEO of Stretch. We are an education and financial services company for aspiring small business owners. We believe anyone can pursue small business entrepreneurship with the right education and financial planning, and that's why we offer online classes and financial products to help people get started.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for being here. A few housekeeping rules just for everybody who's following along in the chat. We're going to be asking a number of questions. I'm going to be asking a number of questions to the panelists, but if anything pops up in your mind, feel free to submit it to our chat that is below your screen there. And my moderator who's off the screen, Brendan, who amazingly is helping produce this entire show, will be sending me those questions so that I can read them to our panelists at the end of the discussion. Also, there's going to be some time at the end where I'm going to invite our panelists to share anything that they're working on, anything exciting that they want us to know about, so that you can follow along their journeys as well. And then finally, we've also included the resources from these amazing women and what they're doing in the website link. So if you'd like to go and check out any of their work, you can do so through that link. And that's also where this recording will be available at the end of this discussion if you want to share it with your friends, which we would not discourage. So with that, I'd like to launch into our first question. And what I decided, because there's so many cool things that I could talk to all of you about. And so I thought that the first thing we could do is ask one question that's kind of tailored to each of your work individually, and then a few other questions that will get more broad that we'll invite all of you to answer in turn. So I wanted to ask the first question. Victoria, I'm the most familiar with you because we work together at Highnote, but you are new to our organization, you're new to our company. And so I wanted to ask you, as a product director, moving from a large company to a fast-growing startup, you might not always tell stories in the way that an author or a journalist might, but you still have to communicate a vision and execute and motivate teams to get behind a vision. So can you share with us tactics that you use to do that, and how you use the power of storytelling, perhaps not in the literal capacity, but how you motivate your teams through gathering them around a shared vision?
Yeah, definitely. I would say that, first of all, different scenarios require different strategies. And so that has to be stated up front. There is no one blanket strategy. But from a generic standpoint, what differentiates you as a product person is your vision of what you want the world to be like. And so if you think about the perfect world that you want to build and the perfect world that you want to live in, and you work backward from there, that vision is what differentiates you from other product managers. And that's the vision that invites other people to follow you and follow your narrative. And so I would say that's kind of like the pie in the sky scenario of painting the world that you want to live in and having people follow you from there. Beyond that, there are a few non-negotiable tactics within product strategy that might have some similarities with reporters as well. There's three that I can name right off the bat. The first one would be clear and concise information is pretty critical because your audience doesn't have a lot of time. I think a lot of reporters also understand that, and therefore the mode in which you're communicating might differentiate a little bit, but everybody's thinking about clear and concise information. The second one is really understanding your audience and your user. Like I said, different scenarios require different strategies. And so understanding where the person that you're talking to or communicating to is coming from and starting from there also kind of leads into strategy and vision and communication. I'll give a really quick example. If someone, is typically in the weeds and the problems, then like lifting their head up and helping them understand where the world is that they want to head in that direction with, you'll use a different strategy versus someone who's, already understands where they want to go. That will have different strategies and different visions from there. The third one would be just like fiercely articulating the problem, like clarifying as much as you can what that problem is and why it's so important to solve is table stakes and non-negotiables. So those would be the three. Thanks, Jillian.
Thanks so much. That's interesting about fiercely. I haven't heard that word like describing storytelling before, so I like that application of that. Awesome. So how about Yassi? If you could tell us, how difficult it has been. I don't think you need to tell us how difficult it's been. We know that having a business, founding a business as a woman, particularly in a regulated space like finance, like what you're doing, that's extremely challenging. I think I read somewhere recently that 9 out of 10 fintech organizations have no women leadership at the top. So you have these hurdles against you. Have you been able to use storytelling to overcome these hurdles? And could you give us some tactics or examples of how you've done that?
Yeah, so great news. I'm still alive.
Yay.
Rolling. But I've learned to use storytelling across 2 key dimensions in my own career. And I think that really applied in my corporate career, but also especially more than ever useful now in my entrepreneurial career. The first dimension is always help my audience or people to connect with me as an individual first. So to better understand why I'm doing what I'm doing and why I'm good at it. And I think we are seeing more women starting companies, irrespective of access to capital or the lack of access, better, to capital. And the questions of why is it you? Why are you happening to be pursuing this mission? And I, saw that a lot in my conversations with investors and others. And a personal story that I share, how it has always, helped me bring across the message that I'm the one who goes against the norm. I'm the one who goes against the convention, and that is in line with what I'm doing with my business really resonates. So I share anecdotes of how, in the old days when I moved from Germany to US, I had a very comfortable life in Germany, and I had a university acceptance, I had friends, I had family, I had a car. And I disrupted everything and came to the US. And I didn't have any place in university. I didn't have any home. I didn't have any friends. So I started truly from scratch. But that's who I was. I wanted to be a rebel. I wanted to do something against the convention. The same, again, I kind of complement this story with other episodes of my life in my corporate career, how I left my comfortable life in London and moved to South Africa, where everybody in my circles was like, why would you do that? And how is it really like, are you sure as a woman alone, where, there's a lot of crime and security issues in Africa, and especially South Africa and Johannesburg. And it really kind of gives a flavor to connect with me as an individual that I'm comfortable going against the norm. When it comes to the second dimension is how do you help people through storytelling to connect with who you are trying to serve, whatever your company is about, and it doesn't matter if you're in a corporate environment or if you're a startup founder, is again bringing stories to the table that help the audience understand why you care for solving for the customers you're helping. And I have a very personal story that I always bring to the table there, that I actually have a loved one, because some of our customers happen to be, experiencing incarceration in the past. And it's kind of like a tricky question when you talk about financial services and business opportunity of how can you serve them the right way, because they have so many different needs and they can be at times very complex. And I always bring my own personal story of a loved one, how I learned through years of, their drug addiction and finally coming back from their isolation and troubles and rebuilding their life, how everything is possible. And that's why we purposefully and consciously make Stretch, a company that serves demographics of all backgrounds. And that includes people with prior incarceration history, or people with prior business failures that want to give it another shot, or people essentially coming new to this country, kind of against the adversity. So again, I think just see who you're serving, who you're talking to. First, get people connect with you, and then get them connected with individuals that you're trying to solve for with your organization.
That's awesome. I love this theme because you think of storytelling as having, the who, what, when, where, how. And it's kind of like, Victoria, you're talking about the how of the story. It's like, the structure, the, being able to fiercely communicate it. And then, Yasi, you're talking about the who and the characters, because people want to connect with a person. So I'm loving these answers right now. Angélique, when you talk about, where you're using storytelling in that literal sense, that you've written a book, and it's called My Superhero is Black. Can you talk a little bit about your process for, creating that story, and how you honed in on the most important things to convey? Because there's a risk in storytelling of being, very broad, and so you kind of had to narrow things down. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. And I think I love what Yasi and Victoria are saying, because you're right. It is an anatomy, right? So before we got to My Superhero is Black, we started off with a show called Marvel's Voices, which interviewed creators and fans, production folks, and really talked about their stories, where they came from, what motivated them, and sometimes had them think about, oh yeah, I guess that did influence my process. I guess that did influence the type of characters I want to write and I want to talk about. And, that moved on to the Marvel's Voices anthologies, which gave us an opportunity to bring those writers in, but also start talking about the history. What was going on in 1970s and 1980s? How did self-regulation in the comic book industry change representation? And I'm really lucky. I come from a journalism background, but I'm also a lawyer, And so I've kind of been taught to keep asking why and to keep looking for the why, because I've realized through years and years of interviewing folks, they may not know the why, but if you look at the larger context of things, the why may be staring you right in the face. And so when we were approached, my co-author and I, to write My Superhero is Black, which, you make a really great point, Jillian. We are still updating that book because there is so much that's out there that looks at how these particular characters are built. We decided to take an approach and look at it as a media survey. So instead of saying, just why are, these are the Black characters, they were created, this is who we are, we looked at diversity as a whole and then used Blackness as the vehicle. So, it doesn't, like, it looks at also race overall in the United States, how that came about, but we look at the why things happen and we take it decade by decade. So the book starts and we look at everything before 1960, and then we look at the 60s and we go, all right, what was happening in politics? What was happening in movements? What was happening in entertainment? We even talk about television and this idea of what were the representations that people were seeing every day and the power of stereotypes. And we wanted to really lay that out to show the context, not of, oh man, some of these things were just wild, but to show some of these things that we think of as inappropriate now were groundbreaking then, and it shows how far we've come. And so we really approached it by picking and choosing prime examples and then looking at who the creators were. And not just going, oh, this was the first person to do this. It was like, let's put this in context that in 1992, this person was doing something that was light years ahead. And it was because they had the ability, because FedEx was dropping off art faster than it used to come in the mail, or things were easier because they were digitized now, or web comics that were created, because what it looks like is the democratization of the story. And so we really wanted to show, which is similar to so many other fields, we use analogies to movies and to music. And, we talk about the shift of music from large distributors into, iPods and MP3s, and how suddenly independent artists have more access to the consumer. Like, we really talk about that because we also want to talk about what puts a fire under the market to become more diverse, to push and keep up, and how new creators get involved. And so it was important to us to spotlight those moments where everything kind of aligned, and to talk about how different cultural movements, prime example, the introduction of Kung Fu into New York in 1972 influences how characters then start being created, whether it's TV or whether it's comics. And so our real look at it wanted to be, let's not just highlight the stories and the creators, which is extremely important in the book, but let's also talk about the context and how all of these things are interrelated. A lot of folks talk about superheroes as though they're our modern mythology, but that means they also reflect the morals, the values, what we hold important. Their villains reflect what we fear. And so those things were really core for us to talk about, because if you look at a villain that came out during the Cold War, it's significantly different than a villain that is introduced in the 90s or the 2000s, as the different evolutions of what we fear shift. The introduction of the internet is a big example of that, because suddenly you've got these high-tech superheroes who can travel the internet, and you've got viruses, and everybody's got a hacker on a team. And I think that's important, particularly when you're looking at diversity, is being able to see when those type of folks that relate to the reader, that relate to the audience, suddenly appear in front of them because they have a place and they have a space. So we wanted to give that to the story as well.
That's great. No, I love what you say about the anatomy because the why is important. And I think it was Steve Jobs who said, find your why and that will make everything else fall into place. And so, yeah, a key part of any story is, well, why is this being told in the first place? What's the motivation? Why would somebody want to do this? So I love that piece of the story fitting in here. And then Nicole, so obviously as a media personality, your most valuable asset is the brand you've built on yourself and the story that you tell about yourself. And sometimes I've encountered that women, they've been socialized or cultured to not be very expressive when it comes to themselves. And that can lead to imposter syndrome or lots of other things. But you've done this successfully. You've managed to create a brand around yourself. What was the hardest part of that for you? And how did you overcome it? And how would you advise other people struggling with that to overcome it too?
Yeah, I mean, you brought it right up in the part of authenticity, right? Authenticity is so much easier said than done. And it takes time and it takes experimentation and it takes a lot of self-reflection, and it's a day-to-day exercise. I don't wake up every single day feeling like my most sparkly and shiny self, right? So I have to take things as they are and have certain processes in place to make sure that my psychological safety is the most important, right? But finding your unique voice and point of view and being authentic is truly the hardest part. And my background is in journalism because I grew up as a biracial Asian American woman searching for myself in media. So I became the journalist to write the stories of people who carved out a place for themselves in the world. And I spent years as a reporter landing in the finance and fintech space, being told that, my voice in the story doesn't really matter. And then I couple that with every time I interview women for stories, or I'm looking to profile women for stories, I can't even tell you how many times women will look at me and be like, Nicole, my story is not special. I'm not unique. I don't have anything to bring to this table. And mind you, I'm interviewing like the top CEOs of the biggest banks, the biggest financial services companies you can think of. Mm-hmm. And I just knew that there was like something kind of wrong there, and so, which is why I created the platform so that I could help a lot more women gain that confidence. But it's like, I have to work every single day, not just on them, but on myself too. Mm-hmm. And I actually have found that communal aspect is what has helped me overcome a lot of the struggles and hurdles with finding your authenticity, which is why I've now created a community, right? Like the iterations just keep coming. I've now created a community around literally arming women in the fintech space, obviously a largely male dominated space, with the receipts, the community, the insights, resources, data that they need so that they can go out and be their authentic self and then be their own best advocate in that boardroom, in that C-suite, in that, whatever management room. Mm-hmm. I think for me, I had to unlock, not only did I have to unlock my personal story and how to tell it, but then you have to be it in the workplace. And that's really, really difficult, especially when you have incredibly, crappy, for lack of a better word, constructs like professionalism. I can't even tell you how many times I'm not called professional because, I wore a dress this way or a blazer that way or whatever, or too much of my skin was showing because this is like, seductive. But anyway, that's why we have to step in. We have to step in. The more of us that step in and be our authentic selves, the more that we band together and this becomes normal. The more that we try to retrofit ourselves into these boxes that were already created for us, then we're not helping the cause. You actually silence the future of the next little girl who's looking at you to hopefully be able for them to be their authentic selves in the workplace. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I would just leave it with if you're going to be a creative, a writer, a human, a product manager, anything in this world, period, you have to give up the popularity contest, because running against the grain is the purpose of our lives, and we are here to repair the world and not help it be the way that it's been, because clearly in a lot of aspects we are going backwards. And the tricks to that are truly understanding who you are, so deeply rooted in your values, and then having people in a community and environment around you that keep you so grounded, so that when the Twitter trolls do come at you, you aren't you know that their opinion doesn't matter, the people that you value opinions matter.
That's really great. And I think that's a big part of it too, because storytelling is itself a communal aspect. Stories are meant to be shared with others. And the story that you tell yourself is only affirmed by you sharing that story with other people. And you're absolutely right. If you don't share it, you can risk having the wrong story about yourself being told, where trolls might be trying to get you to think a story about yourself. But when you have that community of people around you who can affirm your true story and your authentic self, it becomes all that much more powerful and all that much more real. So I think
right. I mean, gaslighting, right? Like the amount of women that I face at my events, at literally the world, anything I do, at a bar, at a restaurant, they're so gaslit into believing, and we all face it every single day and have to overcome it every day. And so to, be around, back to that communal aspect, when we're around each other, I love all women events because they're re-energizing, but also because I get to finally be on stage or in a room filled with people who aren't going to question my experience, who aren't going to question what I believe or what I think or how I feel. And in fact, they resonate with it, and then we're going to kind of laugh about it and move on, and now I feel encouraged to move forward. And so that is such an unlock for sure.
I love that. And this just got me on a tangent that I'll only stick on for 1 second, but the idea of gaslighting is fascinating when I was thinking of this theme for this this discussion, because there is this stereotype that women talk more, right? And that storytelling, are we speaking too much? And it's actually really interesting in that there's a lot of research that's emerged that men tend to have a perception that women and minorities take up more space than they do statistically. So if there's 10 people in a room and 4 of them are women, they've done studies that men will often perceive that 6 of them are women, for example. And so there's this perception often that women, we are taking up too much space, we're saying too much, we're talking too much, we're being too much. And it's exactly that gaslighting that you're speaking to. And I'm just so thankful that so many women are now in spaces like what you all are, because it's about that community that you're bringing up, that now there's more people to affirm, like, hey, no, you're not crazy, you're not talking too much, you're not being too much, you're being exactly what you need to be and who you need to be. So I think that's great. Kind of related to that, when you are in the world of corporate achievement, trying to climb the ladder, whether you're a woman or not, it can be tempting to tie your identity to your work. But when your career changes or there's a pause or a shift, you may need to find yourself rewriting your story, because we can draw so much of our identities from what we do. Do you ever find yourself needing to rewrite your story? Or maybe you don't need to change a career, but maybe you are changing a project that you're working on and it's making you question some things about who you are. Do you have any thoughts on, the stories that we do tell ourselves and how you manage to change the story that you tell yourself so that you can reshift your identity to be back on your authentic self and not external influences? And this one I'm opening up to the whole panel because I think this is something that's like a human experience. We all deal with it. So just whoever feels comfortable going first, go right ahead.
I'd love to hop in. I'm literally on my 4th career.
Oh, wow.
I started off in legislative politics, moved into campaign politics, and then worked in philanthropy before I moved into the current space I am now. And I do remember every single time folks are like, you're a lawyer and you did this and you did this. Why are you doing this? And I was like, because I want to. But what it did train me to do each time is it trained me to look at my own set of skills and go, this isn't just, oh, I went to law school. It isn't just I have a BA in journalism or I did this. It's like, what are the tools in my toolbox? And that's how I started looking, not just at my own skill set and who I was, but also in what I was looking for to do and what I enjoyed in a career, right? Because we are also taught, this fairy tale that we're going to get a job, we're going to get that career, we're going to move up the ladder. It's going to be this linear thing that's going to happen. It's going to be great. And I was like, no, that's not what happens. Some of us have very circuitous ways of going around. Some of us end up being VPs and then going, yeah, this ain't it. This is not what I want to do. I'm going to take these skills and apply them here. But one of the things I did constantly do, and I love that you talked about this, Nicole, this idea of genuineness and brand and creating who you are. You learn how to tell your own stories. You learn how to keep your friends who can tell your stories close. So they're your. Sometimes we need that feedback loop, that wall, because sometimes we can't see our own talent. Sometimes we can't see, what we've done. And sometimes we have to have a reminder that it's okay that we check off more than one box, right? Because, I am a writer, but I am a host and a producer and a photographer, and that's okay. There's nothing about those things that, you're at a certain different level in each one of those that means you can't do that. So I kind of, what I've talked to with younger women that I've worked with is like, look, this is your brand. What do you want to be known as? What do you want people to know about you? Well, if it's not your career, then is it your nonprofit activities that you're working with? Is it your volunteer activities? It's okay if the thing that you were volunteering in 10 years ago suddenly is your job in 5 years. And, thinking outside that box about how do you find ways and learn the fundamentals while bringing your skills into these different spaces. And I think that was one of the best pieces of advice that I got about transitioning jobs is understanding you may be starting at a lower rung, transitioning jobs or careers or spaces, but that doesn't mean you aren't coming in with a full set of tools and really understanding your background and your story and what you're bringing to the table and the insight you're bringing to the table, but also the transferability of those skills. And that's hard. It's hard. Like I said that in a very easy, nonchalant way, but all of that is really hard. And it takes a lot of like sitting down and going, well, what does this mean? Okay, what can I do with this? Where is this opportunity? But I always, tell folks like one of the things that I did, and it was at a different time, I set up my own website. I made sure that I had my angeliquecrochet.com bought before I ever went completely freelance. I made sure all my social medias were consistent. My LinkedIn was always updated. I asked for my references from different places, even if it was a volunteer or an organization I had created with someone else. And I just always made sure I was ready for the opportunity when it came. And because I learned the hard way exactly what you're saying is when your identity is so attached to the job, I think it also is a disservice to the job you're doing. And so I learned that, keeping that was a priority.
To your point, I think my newsletter, my content, my podcast is like a natural extension of who I am, right? Because as we shared, I've been so authentic and vulnerable through the whole process. I built the newsletter from 0 to 50,000 subscribers in 1 year under a different name, like not the name you're seeing right now. I rebranded at the top of the year because even me as an individual kind of knew, okay, well, this worked, but what's the next? I'm not saying rebrand your things once a year. I don't suggest it, but like you maybe don't do that. But like I'm in my early stages. I'm only, I'm not even 2 years old yet in my company. So like I had to think about, okay, this is what my audience and me want. for a while, I wanted to change my name like 6 months into FinTech is Fem. But I thought, okay, we're growing. I have to be taken seriously. All those things in my head, those doubts. But then when the audience also just flooded in and started to like, FinTech is Fem became like a rallying cry for the industry. I think that's a great thing to think about when you're creating anything. It's like, how are you going to make like that rally cry for your audience? That's when the unlock came, and I knew, okay, like this is the brand. But I just want to share that because it does take, back to the time part, a year, and I was terrified to change it over. And I'm like, oh no, I got Fem in the name. Are people good? What are people going to do? But at my like heart, I knew, and my like gut knew it was the right thing. And so I think that's also a huge element of it, because when you see something represented in the outside in your company, if you don't see that thing then dare to build it. That's why there's more women entrepreneurs than ever before, because taking that leap, they're, as Angélique said, get your website owned now so that when you are ready, when you do have the financial needs, when you're ready to take that leap, you're ready to go and be your own boss and your own entrepreneur and own your thing.
That's great. I feel like both of you are talking about having the confidence in yourself to kind of bet on yourself and not be behind whatever brand either you've built or that you've worked for, but your brand of yourself.
Yeah.
I can jump in as well. It's a good segue. Similar to Angélique, I have had several reiterations of my identity in different industries, finance, entrepreneurship, right? Finally tech. But I would say that adding to what both Nicole and Angélique have said, I would say that the shift in identity really comes back to principles in situations where you don't really know what to do. And that comes from the authenticity that was mentioned. And it's also what I would say is like leadership. There were many times where, similar to what Nicole said, as biracial, as an Asian American female, I was ignored or invisible, and that's something that a lot of Asian Americans have felt, especially in American society and especially American corporate. And rather than kind of sitting there and thinking, well, maybe this just isn't the scenario for me, I thought about leadership, and I thought about like, what would I want someone to champion my work to say? What and why couldn't that be me? Why couldn't I champion my work and take back the narrative and say like, hey, hold on, it's not okay for you to erase my work, right? It's not okay for you to make me invisible, even though I led this entire project. Here's what I would do, and I'm going to do it. And then I made it entirely visible. I wrote a blog post about it, right? To the rest of my, brothers and sisters who feel invisible at times. And that is how I took back the narrative and thought about like, how would a leader act in this situation? And I therefore became that leader. But it took, like what Angélique and Nicole said, it took guts, right? It took putting myself on the line and doing something that was incredibly uncomfortable. But then to add to what Yasi said before, at the end of the day, if there's a void, someone's got to fill it. And why not me?
I love that. Can I just say, because it reminds me of like that classic superhero trope of, the person is looking around for the superhero to come in and swoop and save the day. And you look and you realize it's you. You are the one who has to do it. Which I think is amazing and very empowering. And so I love that that's a part of this process as well. And Yasi, do you have anything that you want to add to that too?
Yeah, absolutely. I think all resonates with me. I think especially also what Angélique said, that we grew up with this perception of everything is linear and my identity is going to grow in my personal life as well as in my professional life with this structure of I work hard and I get the results. So my identity kind of keeps growing with that. And you get the reality check that a lot of times, it's very zigzaggy and there is no common sense and logic and hard facts of why certain things happen the way they happen. And I personally experienced that when I was asked to resign from my last corporate role as a managing director in a big banking institution, and with no performance issues or nothing, just with the true fact that we just needed to resign. And that was very hard for me to swallow because I had only been growing in my corporate career and I've been only thriving, and it was hard to not take that personal and let it impact your identity. You know, you hear it left and right about the most successful leaders being asked to leave a position or an organization, you know, where they spend a lot of time and they spend a lot of emotions and, you know, of their own persona in, and they've invested in it. So, and I think it was also an opportunity in really coming back to the drawing board and saying, who am I and what do I really want? What is my identity? Is my identity just attached to some results based on the external world, or who I actually really want to be and what drives me? And, you know, I entered the world of startups, and I always wanted to start a company from scratch. And especially in this field of financial service that I'm so passionate about, and I believe in so hard that there is so much opportunity to change the world for the better. With all the innovation that is happening, and actually learned how much harder the life of a founder is than what I thought the life of a corporate leader, because you don't have the resources, because you don't have the endless, you know, support. There is no structure. Everything is a mess. And it really humbled me in a very different way in life to learn that, you know, identity is not just attached to some results. It doesn't matter if it's my own personal results or external results, but it's actually the journey. You know, it's also a journey in itself as how you think about yourself and grow to love yourself beyond whatever external recognition you may or may not get. It's a personal reflection in yourself, and that's why it's called personal identity. So just, I think, as a last word, I will say, it's not linear, as Angélique said, and just gotta enjoy the journey of, you know, learning and hurting at the same time.
Fantastic.
I love it. Learning and hurting. This is so good.
Oh, it's so true.
It's so good.
Well, it's so better together, right?
Exactly. It's amazing. There's so much I want to talk about. We're almost already at our Q&A, but I think we can fit in one more question that I think is important to discuss, and then we can launch in our Q&A. I think it's fine if there's 10 minutes for Q&A rather than 15. Are y'all feeling good about that?
Yeah, I'm actually really, I think I know what this question is. So I'm really excited about this question. So please ask.
Let's see. Is this? I hope I'm.
Pressure's on.
Pressure.
What if you told me the question that you would like to be?
With the scripts.
No, you had talked to us about this idea of needing to rewrite our stories as we kind of move and change, like going into what you were talking about with these identities. And it was just like a segue from that. And just hearing Yasi talk, I was like, oh man. And then hearing Nicole talk about gaslighting, and I was just like, it in my head, and just like, and for those who are watching, it was just like this idea to need to rewrite your story and how you manage the resulting shift in identity. And it was a moment where I went, no, I remember reflecting back on all those moments that somebody else was writing my story, or someone else's gaslighting, or someone else's perspective wrote my story for me, or made me rewrite my story in that moment. And then looking back on it and making it actually authentic, making it actually accurate with the insight that I have now, looking back on what actually happened in that moment and going, nope, that's not what happened. That actually was gaslighting. Nope, actually, that wasn't about me. That was about something else. And I think just understanding that now, and just hearing what Yasi was saying, and hearing what Victoria said, and hearing what Nicole said, is this idea of, it's not that we've shifted our personalities. I think, and a lot of times, if you're lucky, we've become more of who we were. And like reflecting back on that younger self before we were gaslit so much, or before we were told can't or don't, but that's not how we do it, or, you know, that's difficult. It almost feels more like we are the people that we thought we would become outside of the structures, personality wise. And so I'm sorry I got so excited. I was just thinking, hearing everyone else answer, like, it really isn't it's not a shift to something new. It's almost a shift back.
You really are. Yeah. To who, like, being your full self that you always dreamed and hoped you could be before, you know, you grow up as a woman in the world, and all of the, you know, you got to go to the right college, or you don't get to go to college, or you got to do this and you got to do that, and like you got to be quiet, and like Asian American, I grew up told literally don't rock the boat is like a mantra in my home. Like don't rock the boat. But I think of it like business wise, let's say, as like I'm creating new metrics of success for myself, because we have to remember that the metrics of success that are put out there in business, so make as much money as fast as possible and forget everything else, that is deeply rooted in some BS, in some systemic, racist, misogynistic, all the thing-isms structures that date all the way back to the beginning of American history. So
I call it the greed is good phase.
It's like the greed is good forever era.
Hyper, idolization, the greed is good phase.
Yeah. So we have to recreate, like, I remember like starting on my journey, I'm like handed, here's how to go viral packets. And I'm just like, I don't know if this is going to work for me. Like, I can't think about virality. I'm thinking about changing the world. I'm thinking about something different. And so, and that's it. Like, it's just, you gotta, and it's tough because the world is going to tell you all these other things that matter. You have to have this many followers. You got to make this much money. You got to, and that you have to have your own versions of what success looks like. And that will help you in the identity crisis as well. Yeah.
I will also just add to that, I think it helps you in the sustainability crisis as well.
Yeah.
Because when your narrative is authentic and genuine, and you can pull away at what everybody else says you should be doing that doesn't feel right to you necessarily, it helps not only sustain you energy-wise, but people will suss through.
Mm-hmm. No, I think what I'm loving about all of this is when you think about the intersectionality piece of it, right? All of you have kind of spoken to this fact that you've had stories rewritten all over you by virtue of not only your gender, but your identity, where you come from, your background. And so you're having to cut through all of that. And like you say, Angélique, the end result is you become more of who you always wanted to be, instead of, a blank slate. You're becoming exactly who you could be apart from any rewritten story that could be told about you, which I think is so inspiring about all of you, because it seems like you've navigated that. Go ahead, Victoria.
One thing to add, I would say along that lines, I think it also creates new paths for other leaders to also exist. I think one thing that I'm thinking about is like, the book from Susan Cain, Quiet, changed my life. Within my industry and my field, like I've had to really put myself out there more than what I felt was comfortable, but realizing that there was the capacity to be a quiet type of strategic leader really helped redefine how I wanted to put myself out in the world, and then also to create new paths for other people.
That's awesome. I completely agree with that, because there is a stereotype also about the kind of leader the kind of leader that somebody could be or should be. And but there's diversity of leadership, and there's multiple ways to lead people and the ways people want to be led. So I think that's great too. Yassi, do you have anything that you want to add to that as well?
I think the final word I will just say is, I think when you get into these positions of leadership, there is kind of, I think, high expectations that come with it. And I think a lot of times we look at some female CEOs of public companies and we think they're going to change the world. Maybe they will. And to some extent, maybe they won't. I think sometimes we get disappointed when they serve, and then afterwards, the next CEO is a male again, and another male again. They're like, okay, what happened? So she went to the top and we thought that's going to follow with next chapters being the same. So I think we kind of do not see through that maybe these unicorns, or however you want to describe it, they get to the top because the surrounding had changed completely and they made it through, and the next one is going to come after, or whether there is this just one person that we're putting all our hopes in, and that they're going to kind of set the path forward and become the heroine for many more to follow. So I think as we think about, identity and those who kind of come in and kind of become stories or heroes of stories, I think it's also to be cautious that we can't just take them as super uber examples, uber human examples, and expect everybody else to follow them. they're just also humans at the end of the day, and there's only so much power and influence they have, so.
Right. Well, and we need like a way more of them. Like I would use like Michelle Yeoh and Everything Everywhere All at Once as that example. Like it is so amazing that she won the best actress Oscar and all of the accolades and deserved it. And trust me, like that movie changed my life. But like, yeah, but like we need like the second woman of color to win that award after Halle Berry in however long the Oscars have been going on, almost 100 years. It's not a good look, guys.
Yeah, the scenario has to change, not just not the person.
We need like a bunch of Michelle Yeohs to Kung Fu Glass Ceilings. We can't just have her and call it done. You know, she got a seat at the table. Done. No.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And if we had more, then there wouldn't be that temptation, Yassi, that you're talking about, to pin all of our hopes and dreams on the one person who's there, because there would be so many. You wouldn't need to do that.
There's a lot of research to show that tokenization is actually really bad for people.
Tokenization is really bad.
Yeah, there's a lot of research against it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is great. I love all of this discussion. I could do this for another hour. This is super fascinating for me. But we do have 10 minutes left, and we do have some questions that have come through. So I'm just going to ask it to anyone, and anyone who feels comfortable answering the question, feel free to do so. So the first question is, how would you recommend proceeding building your brand if you don't want to specifically attach yourself by name to a brand? Do you have to, have your name everywhere on everything, or is there another way to go about doing that? Nicole, I feel like that's a question kind of for you, since we've kind of talked about that a little bit.
There's a ton of creators out there that build brands without their personal name attached to it. I mean, I'm not one of them, but I do think that it's completely possible, especially if, you're able to create a brand name that, almost like feels incredibly authentic to you and your identity. But like, short answer, I don't see anything wrong with it. I do think that sometimes that can actually be a more powerful tool, especially if you're feeling like you won't be as outspoken, or as authentic, or as or be your best self, if you will, when creating a brand. If your personal name is there, like if that's a hindrance to you, then by all means start a brand with a really dope name that fits you. I mean, look at Vivian Tu, Your Rich BFF. I mean, she usually is just like, hi, I'm your rich BFF, and that's the name she picked, and she is an incredibly successful creator on TikTok, Instagram, the whole thing. So yes, short answer.
And the other thing I would add to that too, Nicole, is that even though you have built a large brand around your name, you kind of spoke to it. The FinTech is Femme has become a little bit of a rallying cry independent of you. You are kind of the steward of that idea, but it's kind of taken on a life of its own too.
Right. And so what's cool about that is that I like that, I love it when I see people in my community or readers just be like, supporting a fellow FinTech is Femme or something. And like, they don't even talk about me. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like they've created their own thing together in the community, and I didn't even need to do anything or be a part of it. I mean, I do stuff obviously, but like I didn't have to be a part of it. And that's such a, I see someone from FinTech is Femme is speaking at that event. I'm gonna go to that event and support her, and that is cool. That's an unlock, of course. But I think that, and then to like the Your Rich BFF point, I do think that that's kind of cool too, because people follow people, not institutions. We've seen that, to be clear. And so people want to get their education, their, value-driven content, their information all from someone that, does feel like they're your friend. So I think Your Rich BFF is a good example, because she like unlocked what it's like to create a brand that literally feels like, oh, I'm going to go to my literal best friend to hear what she has to say about money.
I love that. Anybody else want to add to that thought? Otherwise, we have.
I would say one thing. I think I see the parallel in corporate. Like your corporate persona is your brand at work, it's your reputation, but it might not be necessarily who you are in life. And so I think like really creating solid principles around how you would like to move forward and act and be like challenging all the interesting problems in the world, but then also recognizing that at home you might be at rest, you might be lazy, you might whatever, all of that is recharge is like completely separate. Those, what Nicole said applies there too, right? Like you can create different personas and it's completely okay.
I like that. That reminds me of, was it Beyonce who has kind of like her performer persona?
Yeah.
Sasha Fierce,
Sasha
yeah.
Fierce.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I do think that's great. It's just like when you need to be in a work mode, you can adopt a persona, and then when you don't want to be in that mode, you can let yourself be at rest. I think that's a hugely important point as well. Okay, I think we have time for one more question, and this one is: how can we make sure that young women get to hear stories that will empower them while putting things into a context they can relate to? So what platforms and in what fashion can you use your work experiences to inspire younger women to develop and grow? And I think the gist of the question is, it's tempting to look at somebody who's at the pinnacle of success and have that be the example, but feel very like that's a huge gap to overcome. So are there any ways that you could encourage younger women to find examples that might be more relatable to them?
I mean, I think personally, a lot of this is coming through on the media we take in. So whether it is looking at what they're reading, and understanding that that may be different, whether it's webtoons or vertical stuff or graphic novels, the type of prose they're reading, is it manga, and then being able to take advantage of that, right? Because we all take in different content and there's a reason why we love it. There's a reason why we connect to it and why we're related, like why we relate to it. I think the other thing that's just really important, and I've kind of, gone through this with a lot of my friends who are professionals because we have our own little pockets who we may not work with, but we talk to, is telling our own stories and being okay with not being perfect. And I think that's something that, benefited me substantially, is having mentors who are like, no, it's okay to mess up. It's okay to figure it out. And I think that's one of the things when it comes to the gaslighting we were talking about earlier, where it comes this idea, we've got to do it all perfect. It's got to be in that line. It's got to be the right way or we're never going to make it. And being able to tell those stories, because I interviewed a producer, Pilar Flynn, who's working on Moon Girl and Double Dinosaur, and talking to her about her stories and how she reaches out to young women. And she told me the story about 3 girls visiting the office and they couldn't find them. And suddenly she went back to her actual office and there they were staring at the inside of the office and they go, Miss Pilar, is this your office? Like all of this? And you just, sometimes we forget that our stories, and I say that again, Nicole, you brought this up. Sometimes we forget our stories are just as powerful as any proverb, as any, analogy, as any historic person we may look up to, because it's relatable. Because, it's tangible, and just us getting to a point where it's like, yeah, no mistakes, not perfect. But here's possibility.
I mean, I think the creator economy has unlocked that entirely, right? You don't need to be shouting from the rooftops of success. In fact, you should be like sharing the ups and downs, the tunnels and the bridges and all of the things that your life goes through to get to this point, because we're all such complex individuals. And I love that, social and the creator economy has created a space for anyone to be open to sharing that personal journey, because then so many more people get to feel seen and heard and connected, and like they're not alone. Isolation is like a huge issue, even in our like more post-pandemic world, and everyone just wants to feel connected. So when we share more of our vulnerabilities, and it's hard, I don't love sharing all of my vulnerabilities, but I do it because I know it's important. Doing it in a way that makes you feel the most comfortable. But it's just, like, if you have an environment around you that you know is going to support you and be there for you no matter what, then they're going to accept you for who you are and your vulnerabilities and who in every aspect of you. And that's like what you want, is a community around you that's going to celebrate you in all your forms.
I'll add to that. I think to go even deeper than just vulnerabilities, I would say specificity is key. I mean, it's so easy to put something out there that is somewhat general, because then everyone can relate to it. And then it's even more valuable for you to tag on a level of specificity that is very rare, so that people can actually find actionable direction from the content that you're putting out in the world, be it a blog, be it media, be it content creation. That allows you to reach even further into what I call the valuable abyss, in which people can find information that actually solves their problem and not just like gets them in the right direction. So my 2 cents there.
That's a really good point too. Yeah, helping people specifically instead of just sharing thoughts generally. It's kind of, we talk about it in content marketing all the time, where it's just like, can you get to the exact problem that somebody's having and speak to that? So I think
it can be scary, like Nicole said, like everyone said, it's being vulnerable is already hard. Being even more specific about what you had to do is quite rare from what I can see.
See anything on your end? I know.
Yeah, I was just going to say, for the younger generation, getting exposure to some of these stories, I think parents up to a certain age have a lot of influence, obviously, even though I think young girls or boys, it doesn't matter, kind of grow up faster these days. But I think with the internet, social media at our fingertips, I think parents can actually themselves try, if they don't know these stories themselves, they can find them and search for them so that they can start talking about them. They can, share them and raise awareness in the household about who these individuals are, their stories, and what are the patterns you see, and at least there is, more exposure that way. If the young girls are not seeing it in their household, because might be a working mother, so they don't know, hey, I can become an astronaut, or I can go and start a company, or I can start a brand and be a creator. So they still kind of hear them. But I think separately also, it helps them hopefully in the future to kind of take that same awareness and their own approach to continue exploring, and not just see the world as one dimension, that success is only this and only these rewards. But I've heard so many different sides of a success story, so I'm going to go and find for myself of what drives me. It needs to happen, I think, early on. And I think we sometimes underestimate the influence we ourselves as parents can have, or guardians or stewards of the next generation. We don't have to be direct parents. We can be a godfather or godmother, and we can still, I think, share a lot of awareness and help them find their identities in a much healthier, with hopefully less hurting, so.
Yeah, what I love about all these is that this idea that we might not find our stories remarkable because we live with them every day, but just being vulnerable and sharing them and sharing the specifics of them, you don't even know the impact that it could have, not just in the people in your immediate circle, but reverberating across your sphere of influence. And I think all of you have done that and are doing it. So I think that is the conclusion of our panel discussion for today. But I did want to give you all, because you're all doing great things, a chance to shout out anything that you might be working on that you want people to check out, any exciting news you have coming up. Feel free to share it right now for our audience to follow along. Anything you want to share?
Always. always working, right? Like, women in this world, we all working. So sure, I guess I'll go first. Please feel free to check out the newsletter. It's called FinTech is Femme. You can Google it and sign up, plug your email in there, and you'll get all the access to a lot of what I'm working on. I host a podcast. It's called Humans of FinTech. Check it out anywhere you get your podcasts. To Angélique's point, it's getting to the root of the values of the humans working in the fintech space, so that we can see where the industry is heading. And I've recently launched the last few weeks a community, a proper organized community for leaders, women, people in allies everybody in the fintech space to have all of the receipts, advocacy community that they need to excel in their careers and thrive. So feel free to check that out. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome, thanks.
Currently working on anthologies for Marvel's Voices. We have Marvel's Voices Spider-Verse #1 coming out in April, if comic books are your thing. Working on a couple projects I can't talk about. But also I invite folks to go listen to Marvel's Voices, which is in a series. Our season is almost on a wrap, but all of the seasons are available, and it's just incredible conversations with folks from set designers, production designers, stunt folks, writers, artists, who talk about not just their work and influences and where they're from, but in particular, this season talks about how they're creating more inclusive teams and what that looks like in their various spaces, and whether that's movies or the comics or books or across the board, bringing in inclusive talent. And they've been some pretty incredible conversations with showrunners, production designers, artists, editors. So yeah, so definitely check that out.
Nice, very cool. Victoria?
Yeah, we are, oh, sorry, Victoria, go ahead.
Well, I'll be brief. I do payments consulting on the side, startup consulting, also product mentorship. So feel free to reach out to my LinkedIn. Also, I am an executive producer of movies that typically prioritize like strong female narratives, as well as like strong minority narratives as well. So from time to time, I love to take screenwriting and invest in those as well.
Wow, fun.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yassi, how about you? What you working on?
So we are, as mentioned, we provide small business entrepreneurship education and select industries. So not A to Z, any type of small business people like to start, but we are increasing our partnerships with organizations that like to sponsor the cost of the education. So we offer, curriculums and seminars on how to start trucking businesses, how to start a home inspection business. And we've had great success with the cost of the education being sponsored. So if anyone is out there in a big corporate environment or, in the government and would like to form partnerships to make small business entrepreneurship better and more expanded for more individuals, please reach out.
Awesome. All right, y'all, I am going to look at all these resources because they all sound way super cool. You all are really, really cool. So thank you so much for just giving your time for this discussion today. I think you have impacted a lot of people. And like I said, probably even people that you didn't even think were listening today, but will be impacted by this somehow in the future. So thank you so much for that. And thank you to our audience. Thank you, Brendan, who's been running points on everything in the background. And thank you to all of the women who are out there rocking it in the world. And with that, have a great day, everyone.
Thank you so much, Jillian. Expertly moderated.
Well done.
This is awesome. Thank you, everybody. Y'all are all so cool. Runs to follow everyone's podcasts and
right? Like new heroes, seriously. All right, bye y'all.